Okay, Isreal Folau has been formally sacked by Rugby Australia. This follows on from his failed appeal against his termination of contract via his code of conduct hearing, which obviously found in favour of Rugby Australia. This is not the end of the saga. He has a 3-day window of 72 hours in which to lodge an appeal against the outcome, which could mean one of three things. Another code of conduct hearing with a new panel of 3 individuals, which is highly unlikely to happen considering the previous ruling from the previous one. An employment tribunal for unfair dismissal for whatever grounds he would deem, which would probably be under religious grounds, I would be assuming. Or he could take them to the High Court over that kind of unfair dismissal and take it to a higher level than an employment tribunal. But there is much wider issues with Rugby Australia and Rugby Union Australia than just Isreal Folau being a wally and tarnishing his image. The way Rugby Australia handled the whole situation from the get-go has been poor, because after his initial posts online, which were deemed somewhat offensive by some, Rugby Australia didn't really punish him in the right way. They had a chat with him, but it wasn't really a stern enough meeting, it seems, because within a few weeks they offered him this multi-million-dollar contract, which worked out at 16 million Australian dollars, which is at 4 million per year until 2022. The problem with that contract is this: Western Force, who are a Super Rugby franchise which now play in a lesser competition, they're still a team, went to Rugby Australia about some centralised funding that they required, and they were asking for roughly 4.25 million Australian dollars so they could compete in last year's Super Rugby tournament and hopefully, compete this year as well. And they were turned down. And Rugby Australia cited not enough funds. This does not make Rugby Australia look good. It doesn't. Instead of developing as many players as possible to contribute towards Australian rugby and to the national side and to player development and to grow the game, they decided to put their eggs in Isreal Folau's basket, a guy who has played the other 2 codes, which are nicking players from Rugby Union, AFL and NRL. He's played Rugby League, he's played Aussie rules. And that's another issue that Rugby Australia has, is they're losing youth players to Rugby League in large numbers. And it's not a new thing. It's been going on actually for quite some time. They develop players at youth level via Rugby Australia has an agreement with high schools and the education sector in Australia with scholarships and various things and scouting and coaching and all these kind of things. And players are switching off. The young kids don't want to continue to the top level in Rugby Union because A, the pay is crap. Base pay is not good enough. And B, there are more teams to play for in Rugby League. There's more chance to break into Rugby League at the top level because there's 16 teams in the NRL, plus you've got the Super League, and then you have the Championship and League One in the Northern Hemisphere, and you've got the Queensland and New South Wales Cups, which is technically the second tier of Rugby League in Australia. And the base salary is more. Even as a part-time player, the base salary is more. You're paid more. And when you do make it to the NRL, you can make some pretty solid money. There is no such thing as a centralised contract. You're contracted to your club. You can make some pretty decent money. Maybe not as much as Isreal Folau, but he is an exception rather than the rule in Rugby Union. But you can make some pretty decent money in Rugby League. And you're more likely to be seen on TV. The crowds are bigger. You're more likely to actually get a starting spot in a team. There are so many young players who've burst onto the NRL scene in the last 4 or 5 years. And a lot of them were once union players at school. But just to prove a fact that this is not just a new phenomenon in the last couple of years that young kids are switching codes, Cooper Cronk. There you go. He was a union player at high school. He finished high school and switched codes. Rugby Union lost Cooper Cronk in the early 2000s to Rugby League. Look what he's achieved in the game. Just going to put that out there. Look what he's achieved in the game. That is Rugby Union's loss, Rugby League's gain. Cooper Cronk is one of the best players of all time. He's one of my favourite players. He's still contributing to Rugby League. He's won back-to-back premierships for 2 different clubs. He's the only player to do so. He's a superstar player. He's also a future immortal, and he's probably a future coach as well. He's probably going to get into coaching at some point. He's going to stay involved with Rugby League, and that is Rugby Union's loss. The skill set he has would not be out of place in a Wallabies jersey at 9 or 10. He is that kind of playmaking player who can bring other players into play. He can make tackles. He can make the runs. He can bring players into play by running hard to the line. He's a break. Bear in mind, he played the grand final with a broken shoulder last year. He's that kind of player. He's a player's player. He's a coach's player. Rugby League snapped him up. So the issue is long-standing, but it's been accelerated because Angus Crichton, his teammate at the Sydney Roosters, also swapped codes. He also was a union player. He's a more recent addition to the playing ranks of the NRL. He's a younger player, and he's one of those players that rugby union's losing. This is not a new thing. That's another issue. The world ranking situation, lowest it's ever been. You can link all these things together. You lose Western Force, so you lose a top flight team. You put all your eggs in one basket with Isreal Folau. Youth players are turning their backs in larger numbers than before. And combine them all together, Australia are at their lowest world ranking of all time. Isreal Folau is the tip of a much wider iceberg with Rugby Australia and its mismanagement of the game and where the funds are going. Because he gets 16 million over 4 years, but Western Force get turned down for lack of funds. That really doesn't look good. Ryling Castle is under a lot of pressure. If Australia have a shocking World Cup and struggle, I believe heads will roll. The Isreal Folau saga is going to continue. His career is most likely over. Even if he does win his appeal via a high court or tribunal and gets given compensation, what club anywhere in the world will want to touch something as controversial as Isreal Folau? That is a thing. Who would want to actually sign him, knowing that if he has a contract, he will breach it? Regardless if he uses religion as an excuse, he has proven that he's willing to breach a contract, regardless of the consequences and the damage caused to the brand. And yeah, it's a messy situation. No one wins. But Rugby Australia needs to reform itself soon and look itself in the mirror and go, why is it losing players to Rugby League? And to a certain extent, AFL. Why are kids turning their backs on the sport? Why did they not help Western Force? It's too late now because Western Force, joined a different competition to play in. But the damage was done. They've lost players overseas. So there's less of a talent pool to choose from at the top level because more Australians are now playing in Europe and therefore ineligible for selection under current selection rules. They've got themselves in this mess. This Isreal Folau is a symptom of the disease that's happening in Rugby Australia. But I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Place those thoughts below and I will have some more videos for you very, very soon.